Good morning and welcome to episode 118 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined as I am each and every Tuesday, except not next Tuesday because I'll be on vacation, but it's Hays Carlyon of The Frangie Show, which you can catch each weekday afternoon on your drive home from work from 4 to 6 p.m. on 92.5 and 1010XL. Hays, first of all, hat tip to you because the last time I spoke to you, I believe it was on Thursday, or maybe you said this on last Tuesday's show, but you correctly predicted that Shedeur Sanders would have to wait for a decent amount of time in the 2025 NFL draft. And so, again, hat tip to you. Nice prediction there. But we won't be talking about the Browns today. I mean, maybe we will if we get into some Travis Hunter talk, some Browns, Jaguars trade talk.
How could they pass on Travis Hunter?
I know, right? We can start there if you want. Hazy, you and I are going to do winners and losers today. So are the Browns one of the losers you had written down?
You know, I understand why they made the deal because they're going to need a quarterback, and next year's class is sensational. It's much better than this one. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes sense for Cleveland, but they probably did just pass on a player that I think is going to be a star in the NFL. I mean, if he stays healthy, there's nothing to indicate Travis Hunter is going to be anything other than an absolute star at the NFL level. Now we'll see in terms of workload, you know, we'll see how much he can really do on both sides. But I mean, it's pretty clear they're more than willing to go with him on this journey to transcend the sport, as James Gladstone talked about. So if he's playing 800 snaps on offense and 600 snaps on defense, with what we have seen out of him as an athlete and a football player, I mean, heck, I think he's going to have a chance to be in the MVP discussion just because he's going to be if he's really able to do that, you know, and put up, you know, obviously he's got to have numbers to go along with that. But I mean, if he's 1,000-yard receiver and he's also playing 600 defensive snaps, I mean, there's no way he can't be in the MVP discussion, and that's every year, and that's what the Browns gave up. So yeah, I mean, I understand again why they would do it. They've got 2 first-round picks next year. If they've got to maneuver up to get one of these quarterbacks, you know, so I understand it, but boy, that's one that you do wonder in 5-10 years if the Browns are going to be like, all we had to do was write this guy's name on a card. And we didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be a lot of people in Cleveland that are like maybe not necessarily rooting against Travis Hunter, but like it's going to be tough for everyone up there in Ohio to like be watching Travis Hunter, the superstar in Northeast Florida, and just imagine that they could have had that in Cleveland, especially considering that both of these franchises are like the losingest franchises, at least since Shad Khan bought the Jaguars in 2012 for the start of the 2013 season. And so either one of these teams could have used like a huge bump in superstardom and could have like made a statement the way that the Jaguars did. I feel like the Jaguars' statement was louder because of the fact that they traded up for Travis Hunter. But yeah, like I think on the surface on Thursday night, it like does make sense for the Browns when you consider that the 2026 quarterback class is stronger. They're still tied to Deshaun Watson in terms of money, even if Deshaun Watson is unlikely to see the field in 2025. And then like Mason Graham Then when you like start unveiling the draft and you look at the Browns got 2 running backs to replace Nick Chubb, and then they also drafted 2 quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel before Shedeur Sanders. Like once you actually see how that trade capital ended up shaking out, it feels like even more of a win for the Jaguars and even more of a loss for the Browns, which yeah, I just I like always you kind of feel a little bit for the Browns organization, but I think especially now considering that they missed out on a top 2, probably top 1 overall prospect in this class, and they kind of like it seemed like the ownership stepped in a little bit for the Shedeur Sanders pick, and maybe like the front office and the coaching staff picked Dylan Gabriel just to not get Sanders, but then they still lined up with both of them. So yeah, kind of tough scenes in Browns. So yeah, I think I would label them a loser as well. Me and Hacker went more in depth about the Travis Hunter, Cleveland Browns, Jacksonville Jaguars trade on Friday morning. which was episode 116. Check that out for more information. But that leads me into my first winner, Hays, which is James Gladstone. And I know that like we have someone on social saying already like winner Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, obviously, for sure, definitely, you're right, and we'll get to both of those names. But to me, the biggest winner in Jacksonville is James Gladstone, just because I think he really made his stamp on the team and even on the league too. I think that if the Jaguars had stayed at 5 or even traded back, then they probably would have gotten away with a skill position player. And then they got 2 running backs. I feel like that, like at a certain point, the draft would have been like, oh, this is kind of like a Liam Cohen and even an Anthony Campanile defense or draft based on the way that they drafted and like got guys that fit those specific schemes on either side of the ball. But because James Gladstone ended up putting his stones on the table pretty much, he really made his mark. And like now everyone in the NFL, if they didn't already know the babyface general manager in Jacksonville, they certainly do now. And so I also think that like a lot of what James Gladstone was saying before the draft and even before like free agency, like before offseason player movement really began, he hinted at a lot of things that became true in terms of that when there's an opportunity to be bold, this new management group, this new regime in Jacksonville won't flinch at those opportunities. He harped on being able to set the dish for Trevor Lawrence in terms of increasing the competition at interior offensive line, which he did in both free agency and the draft. And then, of course, his famous or infamous phrase, however you want to say it, intangibly rich. Certainly every single player in this draft class for Jacksonville, they had 9 total players, were intangibly rich in terms of both the on-field and off-the-field qualities that they have. And as Gladstone said himself, Travis Hunter is the epitome of that. And so I think that this was very much a James Gladstone draft. Again, I think he put his stamp not just on the Jaguars as like, okay, this isn't just like Liam Cohen's team or even just Tony Baselli's team, but he also kind of like made it known to the NFL that not just him, but the organization in Jacksonville is kind of a force to be reckoned with a little bit. Obviously, they still need to win games. Winning games is what matters. And like, you can certainly still have your doubts until we see like a true product on the field. But I mean, this has been a huge win of an offseason so far for Jacksonville. And I think it starts with a new general manager.
Yeah, he's really done a nice job. I mean, you know, it was really interesting hearing him talk about how much the Senior Bowl, you know, was a factor in a lot of these picks. And because he wasn't even the Jaguar GM during the Senior Bowl. Now, obviously, you know, they have the film. Obviously, they go back and review. But, you know, he didn't allow getting hired late in the process to be a deterrent. And that was something that, you know, we had talked about is, you know, they don't have a GM. You know, how's that going to affect the Senior Bowl? And yeah, I mean, you know that they've got access to the video that they can go back over. But, you know, it's also one thing to be there on hand and things like that. You know, and so, yeah, to hear Gladstone talk about some of the stories, you know, particularly that week in Mobile about some of the guys, Kaiser, that, you know, that were willing to do different things because of opt-outs and so forth, and, you know, and put themselves in a compromising position, playing a little out of position. And he talked about Fisk last year with the Rams doing that and how much it meant to him. And, you know, that's all great stuff. And I think in terms of also looking at Gladstone's ability, unlike Trent Baalke, to recognize, okay, the draft didn't fall the way that we had hoped at this certain area in terms of defensive line. So let's go out into the veteran free agent market again, and let's go get a veteran player. You know, we knew they needed edge help. They go and sign Emmanuel Ogbah right after the draft, basically. That's a great sign. I mean, it's a sign of, look, you know, we're not being stubborn. You know, we were hoping that the draft might fall a certain way. It didn't. We didn't want to force anything because we know we can circle back and go get a free agent. I mean, that's the kind of signing that was absent the last 2 years, where there was just this stubborn reluctance to address an obvious need, and it hurt them. You know, Roy Robertson Harris for a good portion of last year was the third leading sack guy 6 weeks after he'd been traded, because there was nothing behind Hines Allen and Walker. So so that also I think is the sign of, you know, a good thorough GM. And yeah, I think it's exciting to see. And now obviously it will now shift to Liam Cohen in terms of getting the roster coached up and maximizing everything. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to feel really good about the transformation of this roster. It was a losing culture. It was a dysfunctional team. And they now have brought in 11 free agents. They've got a 9-man draft class, you know, and we'll see if any of these undrafted free agents can walk and chew gum at this level. But, you know, but they don't really, you know, need them to. I mean, when you start to go through, you know, a 53-man, the only position that I had an undrafted free agent making the team was at defensive end, even with Agba. And that was Ethan Downs out of Oklahoma. But I mean, it's in terms of looking at it, I think the roster's in a really good place. The offensive line was a disaster, and you know, he's now added 2 draft picks along with 4 free agents, and you know, there will be a lot of competition in the room. So, you know, in terms of losers, obviously Ezra Cleveland, I think is top on that list. You know, I think it's going to be certainly a massive challenge for him to fight off Wyatt Milam. But, you know, and he's not the only, you know, veteran player that's going to get pushed here. But, yeah, I think you have to really like overall what they did with the draft class and with the signing of Agba.
Yeah, I mean, like not flexibility, but variety in terms of like deployment of these players, the amount of different positions that they can play, just the flexibility that they offer across various positions is something that obviously has been harped on within the building and expressed to fans and media, the versatility that players can provide. And so I think that's also reflective, not just in the players that they brought in, but also like the actions that they have, especially with signing Emmanuel Agba immediately after the draft. The previous regime was certainly a bit stubborn in the fact that they thought they were fine with Josh Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker and just whoever else they had after that. But as we can tell from not just last season in 2024, but for the past several seasons, it's not just enough to have a true number one in Josh Hines Allen, really good number 2 / low end number 1 in Trayvon Walker, and have that be it. You see teams across the league, regardless of scheme even, just continue to add to their defensive end rotation. And so, as you also said, like I think the roster's in a good spot. I saw John Shipley did his like 53-man projection yesterday, and he only had 1 undrafted free agent making the roster. It was Oregon defensive back Jabbar Muhammad. But similar to what you're saying, like if we're only projecting 1 undrafted free agent to make the roster right now, despite the fact that they signed 20 immediately following the draft, is certainly a good indication as to where the roster is going. I think Ezra Cleveland, definitely a good shout as a loser, considering it seems like Wyatt Milam will be competing for his job certainly immediately and could win it as soon as training camp or like before week 1. I think on the flip side of that, Anton Harrison and Walker Little are probably winners following not just the draft but the offseason, considering the Jaguars did sign 2 backup offensive tackles in free agency, but they didn't sign any. I mean, Wyatt Milam did play offensive tackle in college, and so hypothetically he's got that flexibility to be able to kick out, but because of his like not amazing movement skills, because of his sawed-off shorter arms, he's certainly projected to be a guard at the NFL level. And so there's, again, some competition added, but not really any super threatening competition for Walker Little and Anton Harrison. So I think it does make sense to at least give them the year of 2025 to see what they've got as bookend tackles. But beyond that, yeah, what's another winner or loser that you've got? His,
you know, I'll say in terms of winner, the 2026 draft class. You know, I mean, you lose the first round pick in moving up to get Travis Hunter, and so there's always this sense of, well, okay, and it's still a gamble, but you know, they just can't have a disaster. I mean, that's what, you know, it's certainly a statement of, we think we can win the AFC South immediately, and they should feel that way. It's a terrible division, and the Texans have on paper gotten worse. So, and you know, the Colts haven't done anything that strikes you is in terms of, oh, this is a team that can now go win 10 or 11 games, and the Titans are starting over. So, the division is right there. Obviously the ideal would be the Jaguars win the division. The pick is in the mid-20s at least. And, I think, that at that point, I think you're not overly upset about losing the first rounder. But then to go and get the 2 third rounders from Detroit in a deal moving back, I thought was extraordinary. And so they still have a double-digit amount of picks in 2026. I think they have projected 4 picks in the top 100 right now. So yeah, they don't have the first rounder, but they're still going to be able to be very active in that second, third round to get some players in a draft that will probably be considered better than this one. And so, so I thought that was really key. You're obviously you're giving up your first round pick, but they're still very well set up. And what those picks allow, it may not even be used in the 26th draft. You got a third round pick. Let's just take that comp third from the Lions for the Aaron Glenn hiring. Well, that's like prime for acquiring a veteran free agent, whether that's this summer, whether that's at the trade deadline, if they're in the mix and they feel like they're a contender. And my guess is they will be, close to Houston, if not, above Houston in the standings. So, that's really important. It gives Gladstone, some ammunition to bring in a veteran again, either this summer or maybe at the deadline. So it's really worth its weight in gold in terms of the flexibility that it gives the Jaguars. So I thought that was a winner.
Yeah.
And I do agree. I think, how can Trevor Lawrence not be a winner? He now has probably top 4 most athletic receiver combos. Now, again, we have to see Travis Hunter do it at this level. And, I understand that. I often say, the gap between elite college football and the NFL is still a gargantuan chasm in terms of the jump up in competition. But it certainly looks like Travis Hunter is going to be able to handle that. I mean, and so there is some unknown, but I mean, it looks like Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. I mean, who is going to be able to cover that? And so, I think for Trevor, you do get a remade offensive line. The tackles are going to be pushed. So I think you're going to see a very motivated Walker Little and Anton Harrison. And those 2 weapons. I mean, again, I'm not saying they're they've got to, we've got to see it, but on potential, would it surprise you at all by the time we get to Thanksgiving if Hunter and Thomas are considered a top 5 duo in the NFL? It won't surprise me at all.
Hayes, I've already said multiple times on multiple shows here on Duval Rundown that I think they're as soon as week 1 going to be the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. And maybe that's a bit of a hyperbole. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too far ahead of myself, but even just the fact that we're having this conversation alone, I think I even posted on Twitter, and some people would be maybe the Bengals, maybe the Eagles, maybe the Dolphins. But again, just the fact that it's a conversation, I think is pretty amazing for the Jaguars and for the prospects of Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas and everyone in Liam Cohen's offense in 2025 and beyond. Real quick, I do want to reemphasize your point about Gladstone before talking about Lawrence again, that he's doing it the right way. He took certainly a big risk, a big swing at the plate in trading up for Travis Hunter. But that's the process that we saw during the draft from the Jaguars in terms of the trades that they made is what we see from the best general managers in the league, from Howie Roseman to Brett Veach to Les Snead in Los Angeles, where James Gladstone came from. They're willing to take big swings and make big trades, even if it includes significant draft capital, in part because they're so good at accruing draft capital for such trades. And so the perfect example of that is the Jaguars trading back in the 3rd round of this year's draft to get those 2 third rounders next year from Detroit. And so for as often as they take big swings upward, they take almost twice as many swings backward in the other edition to be able to continue loading up those assets and those resources. And so, yeah, certainly doing it the right way. So just wanted to reiterate your point because it was definitely a good one. And then, yeah, Trevor Lawrence, he's got Brian Thomas Jr., he's got Travis Hunter, he's got even more speed on the field when you consider the running back room too between Travis Etienne, but also 4th-round rookie Byshul Tootin. And so it's going to be certainly an explosive group. I think that one thing that Cohen said, I think it was after the draft, is that like last year in Tampa Bay, the Bucs offense was top 5 in pretty much every single category. They set several franchise records, but in large part because of the like various injuries that they had. Like Chris Godwin was out a handful of games, Mike Evans was out a handful of games, et cetera, et cetera. They weren't really able to rely on explosives and explosive plays as much as they wanted. It was a lot of like churning out 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives. And it's great to be efficient, as Cohen said, but it really helps to also have that explosive element. And so I think the Jaguars definitely address that this offseason. And so I think that, like, even though I led it with James Gladstone, like Trevor Lawrence, for sure, easily like one of, if not the biggest winner from the draft or even the offseason as a whole for Jacksonville in 2025. Brian Thomas Jr. is certainly a winner as well, considering that like going into, or at least leaving the 2024 season, we are all like, oh man, like it's awesome that Brian Thomas is awesome, but defenses are going to be paying a lot more attention now, and it might not be as easy for him to just continue to rack up 12 target, 10 catch, 90-yard, 1-score games. And so now that you have Travis Hunter, even if he's like a 70% playing wide receiver or something like that, just defenses will have to count for both of them. And so it kind of makes both of their jobs easier. But one winner that I had written down was actually Liam Cohen's screen game, because last year the Buccaneers, I believe, I should have double checked this, but I'm pretty sure they ranked first in usage of screens. They're also extremely successful at it in terms of like wide receiver screens, RPO screens, like traditional running back screens that kind of take a little bit of time to set up. Liam Cohen was in his bag last year. And so I'm really excited to see what Liam Cohen's screen game looks like this year, partly because it's going to help out Trevor Lawrence just to be able to get like a few quick and easy completions, kind of get him into rhythm a little bit, help stay in front of the chains. But more than that, like it's just going to be really exciting to watch, because Brian Thomas was really good on screens last year. Travis Hunter is like maybe the best prospect in the class at being able to take screens, not just to the house, but also to be able to pick up any yardage available and be able to continue moving the chains. I think Tootin will be well utilized on screens, but also their 7th-round pick, LaQuint Allen. I'm really excited to see what his role is in year one, but really just through the duration of his rookie contract, since he is a 7th-round rookie. But I think that he's going to make his mark on the passing game. I think that like an oversimplification of it is that like Liam Cohen got his version of Bucky Irving in 4th-round rookie Byshul Tootin, but then also his version of Rashad White in 7th-round rookie LaQuint Allen. And so again, I think that Allen will be a facet in the passing game, and especially in the screen game. I think Cohen said that specifically, that he's excited about using LaQuint Allen on screens. And so, yeah, Liam Cohen's screen game is a winner for me after the 2025 draft.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, the other thing, too, that I think is a big, I think, winner for the team is Dyami Brown's role now with Travis Hunter. To me, it's a much more comfortable role. I never really bought into Dyami Brown is now going to have 75 catches as a Jaguar when he's never had more than 30 in his career. Well, now, to your point, you know, he becomes obviously the third option at receiver, you would have to imagine. But again, somebody who the defense is, they're never going to be thinking about Dyami Brown. I mean, as long as BTJ and Hunter are healthy. So again, in terms of that quick passing game, you know, Liam Cohen's talked about it. You know, why did they want Dyami Brown? Because there aren't too many guys who I can just throw a quick pass to, and he makes a guy miss and takes it to the house. And, you know, Dyami Brown has that speed and that playmaking ability. But now I don't know that he's a volume catch guy, though. And now he doesn't have to be. Like now if Dyami Brown has 45 catches this year, well, that might be fine because his average per catch might be 17 yards. You know, and you know that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to produce big-time plays. You believe Travis Hunter will. So now you've got this third guy that can be remarkably potent, but I think needs to be more in the, you know, 3 to 4 catches a game at max kind of role, but, you know, can give you a lot of yards after catch because of his speed and his playmaking ability. So, yeah, and looking at it, then you incorporate these running backs, and I would keep Etienne. I mean, I would keep Etienne, I'd keep Bigsby. And then you've got the two rookies that I think are incredibly promising. I mean, Tootin obviously is going to have a chance to compete for a big role offensively. And yeah, I mean, I thought Allen was like arguably one of my favorite picks. I mean, because of what you're talking about, 1,000 yards on the ground. He had 500 yards receiving, had, I think, 120 plus snaps lining up either in the slot or out wide. So he's very versatile. And again, playing at Syracuse. And the other thing, too, is he's just like 20 years old. So he's a guy that probably should have, in hindsight, stayed in school and collected some NIL money and tried to improve his draft stock for 26. But that's history now. He's a Jaguar. But to go in the 7th round, obviously that would indicate that maybe this is somebody that doesn't have a ton of ability. I think he's got a lot of ability. I mean, and a lot of upside. I mean, he's one of the youngest players in this draft. And so, I think he is somebody that absolutely in the right offensive hands can be a big time weapon. And yeah, I think it'll really suit. What I think is going to be fun now is the other thing about Gladstone and Cohen is the harmony between the two. And because they've got similar backgrounds, they both have that Rams background. I think there's going to be a really good connection between what does the coaching staff need, what do they like to do, and let's get them players that can do that. And I think that's reflected in this first off season so far. So I think for Liam Cohen, I think he's got a nice array of weapons, both in the backfield, to your point, and and at receiver, and we'll see it at tight end. A lot of it's going to be on Brenton Strange to continue to develop and step up. But I mean, this is an offense where, I mean, if some of these guys take a step forward under Liam Cohen, and I think they will, I think they absolutely have a chance to be incredibly potent. And the other thing too is I now think the offensive line is in a much better place. And so, hopefully they'll be more physical. They'll be able to set the tone for the game a little bit more. And, and we'll see. And defensively, I think they've got talent as well. So I think it's an exciting time. To your point, we have no idea how it's going to work. But I think to this point in the process, you've got to be incredibly thrilled by what you've seen out of this reimagining this new vision of Jaguars football. And yeah, I have confidence that Liam Cohen's going to take these guys and and be able to consistently score points. There was more talent on this team last year than a team that won 4 games. I mean, it's incredible the stories that you still hear about crap that happened last year between Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. I mean, it's amazing they won 4 games. And so to have everybody rowing in the same direction now, have that hunger of these young men with ambition, ready to put their mark on the league. No one's resting on laurels. No one's trying to be the right, I'm right, you're wrong. There's none of that. And I think that's going to be reflective in how they perform on the field.
Absolutely. I think there's also a cohesive kind of plan together for the defensive side too. My last winner for today is Anthony Campanile's defense, and specifically the pass defense, because like we talked about how they signed a 10-year NFL veteran, Emmanuel Ogbah, immediately following the draft to help provide some edge depth. And so even if they didn't do a lot or really anything on the defensive line, I guess other than McLeod in the 6th round, who's like kind of a tweener between outside linebacker and inside linebacker even. Not a lot of big bodies up front, but what the Jaguars did do in the draft is really address their secondary, which as much as I would have liked to see them also address their defensive line, certainly like to see them addressing the secondary, because I think that Jaguars have had one of the worst pass defenses in the league for a couple of years now, in large part to like both of those units. So you certainly need to address. And so I think that Travis Hunter is really exciting. I talked about this yesterday because I feel like Tyson Campbell specifically is a winner, because he's been the kind of guy who's like we talk about field tilting wide receivers, where like a receiver kind of dictates the coverages opposite of them. And I think Tyson Campbell is a field tilting defensive back where like not necessarily offenses are going to like change their game plan based on where they are, but like quarterbacks will adjust where they're throwing based on where he is, especially in zone coverage. He's definitely the kind of the guy that like quarterbacks would just like rather throw elsewhere. And part of that is because like there's a pretty big drop off in talent after Tyson Campbell in the cornerback room before the draft. But now they've got Travis Hunter, who's like even more of a field tilter in the fact that like quarterbacks just never want to throw to him, again, especially in zone coverage because they're so scared about his instincts and athleticism and being able to just like snap the football and be able to get somewhere and interrupt the throwing window immediately. And so like that all is amazing. But then when you add on top of that, Caleb Branshaw drafted in the 3rd round. Jabbar Muhammad, I named earlier as an undrafted free agent, certainly brought in a few interesting defensive backs in free agency. They also got Lane out of, I don't know how to pronounce his first name yet, but Lane out of Navy in the 6th round, who will probably be more of like a really good special teams player. But again, they are adding to the defensive back unit, and it was much needed. And so I appreciated seeing those resources poured into the secondary, but I'm sure Anthony Campanile also appreciated it as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing Ransaw and what he can do at safety. And, again, you talk about the 4.33 speed and across the board, this was a team that was an issue, top end speed on the roster. So to get Ransaw, obviously we talked about Tootin and what he can do 4.32. Travis Hunter didn't test, but we know he's a 4.3 guy. And defensively, I think Kaiser is going to fit in well. Probably a big special teams role immediately and more of a reserve role defensively, but somebody who over the course of a 4-year rookie contract, can become an impact defensive player. Jalen McLeod will be really interesting to see. Gladstone really raved about his versatility. Is he able to rush the passer? That'll be fascinating to watch once we get into those one-on-ones in camp to see what kind of moves it looks like he possesses. So, yeah, I mean, going down the line, I think if you're Anthony Campanile, you've got to be excited about what you've got to work with. I thought it was interesting, too, that they obviously like the interior defensive line. That was something that we thought, we thought for a while Mason Graham might be the pick at 5. And as it turns out, they like the room. That was a surprise for me because the defensive tackle class was so loaded. So you just assumed at some point the value would match up with where they were. But again, looking at it, Mason Smith, Eric Armstead, Devon Hamilton, Jefferson, and then Lacey. So, it's not certainly a bad group at all. But the things that pop is Armstead's got to, play better than back in his natural home at D tackle, which I think he will. And Mason Smith has to take a step forward. And if that happens, then that room's in pretty good shape. And so, I think in looking defensively, it may be like where they would look to add now. I think they're in pretty good shape. I assume at corner, you've got Tyson Campbell, Travis Hunter, Jarrian Jones, Jordan Lewis. They've totally redone the safety room, which they needed to do. Darnell Savage was a loser for sure. Yeah. With the Ransaw pick and the Lane pick. In looking at safety, you've got Eric Murray, who they've brought in free agency. You've got the 2 rookies. Savage will make the team because it doesn't do them any good to cut him. And then, Andrew Wingard's going to be in for a battle. I think he'll make the team, but, I think in looking at it, they'll keep 5 safeties. So, but that's a very competitive room. And so they've done a nice job here. And now it'll be fun to see this team get, out on the field, and we'll start to get our first impressions of them in OTAs. And then heck, we're just a couple weeks away from having the schedule. And that's going to be really interesting because it's a tough road deal. They've got to go to London. They've got to go to Arizona, Vegas, San Fran, Denver. I'll be interested in seeing if any of those West Coast games are back to back. I would request that. I don't know that if they'll want to do that, but it's a lot of travel. So it's we're just getting cranked up. The draft's over, but there will still be a lot to break down as we kind of get our first impressions of these players. We see the schedule, what this team is going to face, and what's now a make or break year. I mean, this is certainly not a rebuild in any stretch of the imagination. Like getting Travis Hunter, trading up for him, giving up a first next year. The statement to the league is simple. The Jaguars believe they can make the tournament. Now, again, in a bad division, that doesn't mean they feel like they can win the Super Bowl. But if your path to the tournament is outlasting the Texans, Colts, and Titans, well, that's not exactly a murderer's row of teams. And so, go 10-7. If you're able to do that, you're probably going to be in really good position to win this division. I think the Texans have taken at least 2 steps back. So
Yeah,
it's right there.
Yeah, man. Like, as I think Mina Kimes put on her show that I was listening to, like all the Texans moves I think make sense in a vacuum. But then when you consider that they just like completely took apart their offensive line and like did not do nearly enough to like put it back together, especially in this recent 2025 draft. Yeah, I certainly think the division is right there for the taking, and I certainly expect the Jaguars to make the playoffs. I mean, you got to consider health, especially like Travis Hunter having like the white frame. You don't know whether he really can play 2 positions, especially as a rookie. Trevor Lawrence has been banged up for the past year or 2. And so health with the health caveat, though, like this team certainly has the talent, and it seems like they've got the leadership to be able to make a run. So that'll be a lot of fun. Real quick to answer a question, someone asked where Jarrian Jones fits now. I think for him, it's kind of like a similar answer as like what you're talking about with Etienne, where like even if like for Etienne, like pretty clearly the Jaguars are preparing for a future at running back post Etienne since he is on the final year of his deal. But I think for Etienne and Jarrian Jones, even if they probably could be labeled draft losers just because of like the positions that were taken by the Jaguars, it doesn't make sense to like immediately try to like look for a trade chip. Like injuries happen during the preseason and during training camp. And so, like, the depth of the team might not look like what it is right now compared to in the future. And especially for cornerback, where, like, Travis Hunter is going to start out mostly on offense. And so even if Jarrian Jones isn't a full-time cornerback or a full-time starting cornerback, I'm sure he still will see his fair share of snaps. And so, again, like, it's fair for people to, like, put them in the bucket of draft losers. But I certainly don't think they're going anywhere in 2025, or at least until the trade deadline. Like, maybe if everyone is healthy and the Jags feel good about their depth at those positions and they feel like they can recoup some picks for those guys, then maybe we see something happen in like November or October October. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that. But Hays, we've gone a little bit. Thanks so much for joining on Winners and Losers this episode. Again, Hays will be out of town on vacation next Tuesday, so he'll be back in 2 weeks' time. But Hays, thanks as always. That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely, Gus. Have a great day. Thanks.
All right. I will be back tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. with JP Acosta of SB Nation to break down the Jaguars' 2025 draft class again. So see you guys tomorrow at 9:04 a.m. Thank you, as always, for our listeners, watchers, and especially our commenters.